Hello everybody, this is Chaos with Chaos Esports Productions, bringing you another viewer cast. Today we're going to be looking at a PvT submitted by Oleg from Latvia. And first off, I want to wish everybody a happy new year. I know I'm excited for another year of StarCraft and gaming in general, as well as creating this content for you guys. So, Oleg suggested that I talk a little bit about just his overall mishaps mechanics-wise in this game, things that he can improve on, since he is, I would say, relatively new to Heart of the Swarm's got about 350 games under his belt overall in StarCraft 2, recently upped his account to Heart of the Swarm, and is just now getting into the swing of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the mechanics things, some things he needs to think about as far as unit composition, as well as just overall gameplay in general. And we'll go from there. So, hope you guys enjoyed the break. I know I've enjoyed seeing all my family and friends and whatnot over Christmas and New Year's. Great times. And glad to get back into it. So, Cavalryman, or Oleg, is in the Bronze League, so still just getting used to the new units and the new build orders. This game is actually kind of interesting because he does go for the double gas, which is definitely a more Heart of the Swarm-esque build. I'm going to go ahead and speed it up so we can actually kind of walk through some of the interesting stuff that goes on. Now, first off, we see him lose this initial scouting probe. Now, one thing that I recommend, especially when you're up against a Terran player, the biggest tell of what your opponent is going to be doing is whether or not he has taken this first gas. If he's gone for the first gas, the most obvious choice for your opponent to go for is that really early Reaper. And obviously Reapers can be quite annoying if you don't have a Stalker or Mothership Core out in time. So getting that initial scout on the refinery is going to be a very, very key part to your opener. Now, I do want to make one quick comment about this setup here. In Wings of Liberty, this was probably fairly prevalent. In the PvT matchup, not so much. I would say against Protoss and Terran, this is actually better off built back closer by the base to minimize the amount of travel time that this probe has to go back and forth to optimize that mining time and make sure you get in here. And, you know, just basically overall helps your build, makes you be able to get up buildings just that much quicker. So he's going to just come over here and chill out, and then your Zealot's going to be like, hey dude, what's up? And he's going to forget about him and die. So, opponent's going to go ahead and expand and pretty much do what a normal Terran would do, go ahead and get up his second and third racks, and then just focus on getting out his SCVs and mules. So you're actually going to choose to push out here, which is kind of an interesting move. I like doing this type of thing just because it gives me a better idea of the timing of this natural, but it also gives you an opportunity to do a little bit of damage if he skimps on units and things like that. So you're actually going to come over here and meet a couple of his Marines. Going to get a couple of them for free, which is quite nice. Now, one thing that I highly recommend, if you ever choose to move out like this, always bring a probe with you. While, let's see, Warp Gate isn't quite done, had you brought a probe with you, you would have been easily able to plant down a pylon and potentially get a round of warp-ins in if you don't see any units. So that would have been definitely a lot more beneficial to you for this push. And actually, if I recall, he actually does a big SCV pull that basically means that had you done that, you would have been able to do a lot more damage than you did. So you're actually going to come in here, try and focus down some of these Marines. Now, one thing that I highly recommend, I believe at this point you're trying to recall as your Mothership Core is kind of traveling over here, and if I remember right, when I looked at your camera, you were kind of like, need to recall. Let's see, check out his camera. Yeah, you're sitting here trying to find it, and then you're like, okay, recall. Yeah. So, once again, like I said, if you had planted down the pylon down here, your warp gate would have been up. You'd have been able to warp in a handful of units and pretty much just been able to walk in here and win. While your opponent does have a decent amount of production, you still would have been able to get a lot more damage done than had you did what you did. So just a suggestion for the future. Behind this, you're going to be getting up your expansion. Things are looking good. Now, going for the Stargate, that is perfectly fine. So we'll, you know, no real problems here. The placement of these forges is probably not the best placement. You never know when your opponent might come in here and try to like snipe one of these from the low ground with some medevacs. You don't want to give your opponent the opportunity to set you back. So I would recommend putting these forges probably somewhere either back here or even up in the main, kind of back on the side, just to get them out of the way. And then one thing I did notice is you do chrono boost this forge like 2 or 3 times while it's not researching anything. So I'm not sure if this was a mistake with a hotkey, as we do. Well, let's see. No, these are not on hotkeys. So basically, you're more or less just kind of chrono boosting the wrong thing. Life happens. So yeah, so your oracles are going to come in and try and get as much damage done as they can. Your opponent did scout your Stargate with the scan, so he's obviously preparing for dealing with that with these turrets. And actually this oracle gets a lot of damage done. As we can see, 9, 10... yeah, so 11 kills total. So yeah, so overall, I'd say this was a very effective oracle doing your thing. The only thing that you might want to work on is by having this guy on its own hotkey, you can easily get back and forth between your bases and your units, so you can micro a little bit better. As you could see while that attack was going on, the only thing that was really going on was this armor upgrade, which means you weren't building any units, and that is why your minerals are going through the roof. Yes, you are starting to get some gateways and things, get your production back up to its full potential, but had you been able to macro appropriately, your supply advantage would be probably in the 30s or 40s. Which is a significant amount, just because your opponent's was pretty set back by that that oracle going in. So, just small things. Once again, still only one forge working at a time, so probably should have only built one. That would be... So, this is where things start to get a little bit scary. Now, this army right here, quite honestly, if it were to go 1-to-1 against this army, would not win. Reason being, with stutter set micro, your units will get picked off really, really quickly. And then another thing is you need to make sure, let's see, part of your units are not on this hotkey. So when your opponent came up and kind of like tricked a couple of them to move out, obviously not your entire army didn't go with it. But you need to be paying attention to what's going on, especially at your front door, because this could have just lost you the game. Because he does come in here and try to get a fair amount of damage done. You do get a couple nice force fields, and the photon overcharge is just enough to push him back. So I'd say overall the engagement wasn't terrible for you, just because you had enough units and some pretty decent force fields. But overall, I'd say that this was a very, very scary situation where had you not landed those force fields, your opponent would have been able to just waltz right in and get a lot more damage done. So behind this, you had an oracle try and get a couple more kills. So 8 kills on this oracle. So overall, your oracle harass is doing its job. Now, at this point, this is a little bit late in the game to start thinking about this, but Colossus or Templar should have been a high priority, especially in the PvT matchup, just because Terrans tend to favor the Marine Marauder Ball, and without any area effect units, it's just very, very difficult to deal with it, just with assuming that your opponent can micro. This army, while you might think it's scary, and probably was super scary in the Wings of Liberty, is actually not as scary as it was before, especially with as few zealots. You only have 6 zealots, and zealots are what are going to tank the majority of the damage that your opponent's going to be able to be dishing out. So this is definitely going to be a little bit not favored in the matchup. You do have charge, which is good. So this is about the time where you should start really pumping out those zealots and getting out your Templars, since I believe that's the route you end up going. So you have several engagements, such as this one, where just because you are waiting for the engagement to end, let's take a look where your camera is. Yeah, you're watching the engagement. You're not spending this money where it should be. Your opponent's doing a pretty good job of keeping up his production. So basically, units are just going to continually stream out here, and this will soon be an unfavorable engagement for you. I mean, if we look at his Marine Marauder count, isn't that big. Granted, if these Immortals get focused down, this army is just going to get totally disintegrated by the number of Marauders that are there. And on top of that, with this many medevacs, it's going to be even more difficult. So medevacs are coming in. He does pull a couple of SCVs, but this is kind of where, had you had more zealots, you would have been able to get in here and get a lot more damage done. So you're continually warping in Stalkers, which is not the most favorable. Like I said before, since he's very Marauder heavy, the Stalkers really aren't going to be able to do that much damage at all. So your opponent's going to come in here, snipe your third. Now, this is something that you should be paying attention to, because let's take a look at your camera. You're sitting here watching it, and you've got lots of probes transferring. So this is kind of a turning point where you lose all of these probes. Not sure what you're trying to pay attention to, but so starting to get storm, things are looking good. But yeah, you really need to focus on what is going on. I think that's the biggest issue that I've seen. You've had a lot of times where something really bad is happening and you're not necessarily focusing on it. You look out and have just enough cannons to deal with that, which is kind of nice. But at this point, you're definitely on your back foot. But if you look at your minerals and gas, you're floating a lot. This is about the time where you should probably throw down 2 or 3 more gateways, because that extra production is going to what drains this your bank. Starting to get out some Templar, which is nice, but if I remember right, you morph several of them into Archons, which is okay, but the Storms are what's going to be really, really effective here. Archons are really good, but in comparison to Storm in the scenario of a big Marine Marauder ball, Storms tend to outweigh most things. So here's kind of where things, rubber hits the road, giant engagement. At this point, you're just waiting. I'm not quite sure why you're not using these warp-ins. The warp-in cycle, I believe, what is the cooldown on? Let's see. 45-second cooldown. So if you, in the time, let's see. Let's just take a little guess. I'm going to guess you probably could have gotten in 2 more warp-ins before this army actually engages. So there's your first warp-in. So there would have been your second warp-in, according to your timer. So actually, as we can see, you're already queued up, but you're not using them. You're more focused on getting out cannons and trying to deal with the impending doom. Now, this is a very, very crucial moment. You are trying to expand. Your expansion's on the way. Let's take a look at your camera, because this is going to be... We're going to slow it down just a little bit. So you see the engagement coming, you move out your army, but just as a function of your opponent getting into the high ground position, you're just not in a very favorable position to do any damage to this. Your first storm's really good, second storm's really good. Now, this engagement, by all means, was traded very well. You know, your supply is definitely down, but the only reason it's down in comparison to your opponent is because he's got units streaming across the map and still in production. So, you know, had you kept up your macro, I think earlier in the game, I think it would have gone a lot better. Like I said, I don't think, as far as the build goes, I don't think your build is a problem. I think the only minor critique I would have is for the robotics facility to go down, or robotics bay to go down a lot quicker, and the Templar archives to go down a lot quicker. Other than that, I'd say the build was okay. So from a fundamental standpoint, let's just kind of do a little recap. At the beginning of the game, you really don't need to do this wall-off setup. It's very, very safe to go ahead and plant this down, and then just whenever you get units out, put them out at your ramp. That's pretty much okay for the PvP or PvT matchup. I don't think I commented on it earlier, but you did 2 gas before Cybernetics Core, and then put 3 guys into each gas. Now, typically you would see 2 guys in each gas, and then that would follow up after you get, I think it's around 14 or 15 guys on minerals, then you would fill in the last guy in each gas. That gives you pretty much the option of going any of the tech tree paths and able to be kind of efficient at teching quickly. And then as far as whenever you move out early game, you definitely want to make sure you bring a probe with you so you can plant down a pylon and potentially get a lot more damage done in the early game. That would have been a very, very helpful thing, especially in this game. And then overall area effect units in the PvT matchup is a definite must. I cannot stress it enough, especially against a Marine Marauder medevac type situation. So I think that's all I had as far as comments to this game. So I hope you enjoyed. Feel free, if you've got any other questions, leave those in the comments down below. Also, if you are not Olag, feel free to go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you did enjoy it and want to see more content. Also, feel free to hit the like and share with your friends on Facebook and Twitter who are trying to learn Protoss here in StarCraft 2. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Yeah, and if you would like me to do a viewer cast of one of your replays, feel free to go ahead and send your replay to the email address in the description. I'd be more than happy to take a look at that. And I think that's it. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next game.